When I was around 5 years old, my Uncle Jeff took me to the Natural History Museum with my brothers. I wasn't particularly interested in going to the museum in the first place, but my uncle was visiting from Chicago, so I had to go. When we got to the museum, I knew we would be there for a long time, going into every single room imaginable. I remember thinking all the rooms were boring and not as cool as Uncle Jeff said they would be. By the time we got to the whale room, I was totally done. But the whale room was actually really cool. I went around looking at every single window and meticulously searching for everything on display. Then I went back to the middle of the room, right under the whale where I had parted from Uncle Jeff and my brothers. But they weren't there. I grazed the room to find them. When I didn't see them, I ran to the next room to see if they had gone ahead. As soon as I realized I was lost, I didn't immediately freak out. I realized that I was basically living the plot of my favorite book of all time, which I had already read 3 times, from the mixed-up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Weiler. It's about 2 siblings who run away from home and live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Even though my situation wasn't exactly like the plot of the book, it was still an exciting experience. After about 20 minutes alone in the next 2 rooms after the whale room, I started to worry about Uncle Jeff leaving without me. I went from being a brave, young, independent girl in a museum, basically living in her favorite book, to being a scared, frantic child lost in a museum in New York City. I nervously fast-walked out of the room and found the security desk in the front room. I remember feeling really brave when I went up to the security guy, leaning against the desk and telling him, "Excuse me, I think I'm lost." I remember the security men being very kind to me and taking me to a room where they asked me my name and who I came to the museum with. I told them my name and that I had come to the museum with my uncle and my 2 brothers. Next, they made an announcement on the loudspeakers throughout the museum. I started to get really worried that maybe Uncle Jeff had assumed I had left the museum and went home, and he had left the museum to find me. After 5 minutes had passed, I started shaking and wondered if I would ever see my family again, or if they would ever find me. I wondered how Claudia and Jamie, the main characters of From the Mixed-Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Weiler, had the courage to leave their family and live alone. After thinking about all the ways I could possibly live on my own in New York City, Uncle Jeff walked into the room with George and Peter. I shot out of my seat and ran to my brothers and gave them a huge hug. I thanked the security guards and asked Uncle Jeff if we could please go. Of course, my mom was kind of mad, and I could tell Uncle Jeff felt really bad for losing me, and to be completely honest, I was kind of mad at him for losing me too. But I got over it when I remembered that for 20 minutes I was basically the character from my favorite book. I told my brothers all about it, since we had read the book together. I could tell they were kind of jealous, but they wouldn't have been that brave.